Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. I am your host, Haley Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production. Today I have a episode with one of my clients. Actually, her name is Betsy O'Brien. She is a writer, blogger, content creator, and podcaster from Santa Barbara, California. Her brand is called The Bets Life. So if you want to check her out, that's her Instagram, her podcast, her website, The Bets Life. So in this episode, we talk a lot about how to grow a blog and a podcast, some marketing tips, and really, she started her podcast 2 seasons ago, and she already had a blog. Her blog just turned 3 years old, and so the reason she reached out to me to start her podcast was because she really wanted to round out her brand. So there's people who love reading content. There's people that love listening to content through podcasts. She also has a great Instagram. So her brand is very rounded, and this really appeals to a lot of sponsors, a lot of consumers. And really, if you're looking to start a brand, a personal brand, Betsy's a great example. So we talk about how to make money through partnerships, her workflow, and then she also shares some really great tips on media kits and pitching yourself towards brands. So a little bit more about Betsy. Betsy's goal is to dive deeper into honest and relatable conversations and topics, whether it's through a vulnerable blog post, a funny video, or an eye-opening podcast interview. She is a writer at heart and has been featured in many magazines. And she started her blog back during the pandemic and has just grown it ever since. Since starting it, she has evolved to encompass a lifestyle brand that hopes to inspire people to lean into living their most authentic and best life. In her podcast, she ends each episode with, "How are you living your best life?" or "What does your best life look like to you?" So this episode has a lot of great content, especially if you are looking to create more content, if you're looking to start a blog, a podcast, whatever it may be. Betsy shares a lot of great details. So super thankful that she joined me on the show today, and let's dive right in. Hey, Betsy, thank you so much for joining me on the Employee to Boss podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So for the audience who doesn't know, Betsy is one of my clients. I helped her with her first 2 seasons of the Bets Life podcast. And I was thinking, I was like, I need some more guests. I listen to Betsy every single week, share her life, but I truly don't know like how you started your business and your blog and things like that. So I'm really excited to learn more about you today.
Yes, you and probably my mom, I know, have listened to every episode of the Best Life podcast, and I have as well, obviously lived it and listened to it,
Yes.
but yeah, I always think about that. Like, Haley, she's gotta be a major
I'm a big
fan
fan
now.
of you, right?
Even if you don't want to be, you have to listen to every episode. So no, I feel like it's been such a pleasure working with you. I sing your praises all the time, and I to this day feel very confident in saying that I would never have gotten my podcast off the ground or not in a timely fashion if not for you. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's super sweet of you. And I love how you talk about so many different topics on your podcast and have so many cool guests, mainly from Santa Barbara, which is where you're at. So,
Yes.
and a lot of your podcast episodes actually connect to blog posts that you've done.
Yeah, it's worked out sometimes nicely with some more evergreen topics I've talked about via the blog and I've written about, or even something that I've made a funny video about on social media. Sometimes I think, oh, wow, that would be a really good podcast. And I can get a little deeper into a topic in a different way than writing or even something put on social media. It's just a different medium and a different platform, as you know. So I can give my perspective a little bit. You can hear me talking about it, tells a different story, obviously, hear different emotions. And especially if I have guests on, then I get even another different perspective and their take. So, yeah, it just creates a fuller picture, I think, which has been nice and to dive a little deeper sometimes in these relatable topics that a lot of women and a lot of female entrepreneurs deal with.
Definitely. And I'm imagining that your audience for the podcast and the blog are similar audiences, but there's definitely probably people who enjoy listening to you, and then there's people who enjoy reading more. And so it's awesome that you have both of those sides to really like round out your brand.
Totally. Because that is something I'm sure you know and tell people who follow you may not listen to the podcast,
Mhm.
and some people that read my writing may not follow me on Instagram. You don't necessarily have the audience that crosses all platforms. Sure, I think I do have some people that are really engaged and listen to the podcast and read the blog and engage with social media, but people have their particular interests. So, however they want to find me or interact, or however I can serve them, whether it's because they love listening to a podcast and that's how they really process information well, or they love reading something, it was fun for me to dive into the different platforms because I felt like they offer something for everyone in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about this later on, but it also helps you when it comes to partnerships, I'm guessing, because
Yes.
you have all these different places, and some brands want to partner with podcasts, and some want to partner with, visuals on Instagram and the blog. And so we'll get more into like those details later. But do you want to tell us like who you are, your story, and really how you started the Bet's Life brand?
Yes, for sure. So, as you said, I live in Santa Barbara. I was born and raised here. And I have a background in real estate. So, I'm still a landlord. I am always looking at projects still, fix and flips, all that over the years. But I turned 30. I'm now 33. But this all started, I had a little bit of an awakening, if you will, or just a moment of reflection when I turned 30. This is a little morbid, sorry, but I was like, well, my life's probably like a third over. Let's be real. And what am I doing? I kind of took a minute to, I guess I was a little early because I think people really did this during the
A midlife
pandemic.
crisis. Yeah.
Right. A little bit of like a true, like, what's going on here? This is kind of a point in the road. So I looked at that and, well, I love aspects of real estate and I've done well with it. I wasn't necessarily like I was put on this earth to do these house projects, or it wasn't something I was jumping out of bed to do in the morning. So I had that moment where I thought about what I had always enjoyed doing and what I had thought I was kind of going to do. And a big part of that was always writing. I've always been a writer. I had magazine internships and did blogging and stuff like that right out of college. And then I veered away from it. So, something I thought that my past self would basically be like, Betsy, what are you doing? We're not doing writing. Like, how did this happen? So, I decided I really wanted to get back to it and I wanted to write about a lot of topics that were coming up for me as a getting into my 30s woman, and even just conversations I was having with friends, conversations I was having with my spouse, all this stuff that I thought, wow, if I'm having these light bulb moments or I'm having these conversations or these insights, I think a lot of other women can relate to this. And I want to share in those stories. So I started writing again. And then it was a little bit of like, if you give a mouse a cookie, because I started writing and then I thought, well, how am I going to share this? I need to create a website. I was like, oh boy, I'm not super techie, as you know. So that was a whole other journey. And then, oh, I need to make a social media account from scratch. And then I need to, it was just one thing after the other that kind of snowballed into the Bet's Life. And that's my brand. That's my blog. That's the name of the podcast. That's what everything is under for me, kind of an umbrella brand, if you will. So, yeah, I started in 2020, May of 2020, which was a wild time, obviously, because it was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So, good news is that I was at home a lot. So, I was able to write a lot, produce a lot of content, and really focus my attention just on building the Bet's life and working on my website and all that. The bad news was obviously it was kind of a crazy, weird time. And I don't know, a lot of people launched things, a lot of people stopped doing things, a lot of people took a look at their life like I had already done of what they wanted to keep pursuing and what they were passionate about. So that's how it got started. And now it's led to, like I said, the podcast, modeling, Santa Barbara stuff, lifestyle. I kind of, wear a lot of hats and have done a lot of things with it now. So
Yeah, but I mean, it's all such amazing things. And I love being able to see you on Instagram doing your fun reels and then, being able to see your blog, and your website is awesome.
no,
So
thank you.
lots of like amazing things going on there. And like you said, you're about 3 years into this. Your anniversary just came up. Did you celebrate it for the blog, your 3 years?
No, it's so funny is I just thought about that recently. It was like, oh, wow, that was 3 years. I maybe should have done something, but because I just did the podcast about it semi recently, I was going through this PCOS diagnosis kind of around that time. And I was just like emotionally kind of overwhelmed and going with stuff. And then we're getting ready to move to France for 4.5 months at the end of June. And I've been dealing there's just been a lot going on. And
Yeah.
so I would love to say that I popped some bubbly and really celebrated my third anniversary, but I have not, and I need to. So it's
You can
funny. I kind of
celebrate in France.
100%. I think I just need to get through this time, get to France, and then I'm gonna be like, all the celebrating. Let's do it all. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I am proud of 3 years, and it is a marathon. You start working on this stuff, as you know, and building a brand, building a business, and it's not an overnight thing. And there's been lots of learning curves and bumps along the way and evolutions. So I am proud of 3 years. And it's starting, I feel like my account, even recently, I'm getting a lot of momentum, getting people really finding me. And so that's been fun and definitely a milestone, which I am proud of.
Yeah, well, congrats on that. And that leads into my next question. You do have this traction and all these fans for all different parts of your business. So I'm curious if you could give any growth tips. I know a lot of people talk about starting blogs, but don't really know how to promote it because, Instagram makes sense for the algorithm and
Mhm.
things like that. But how do you actually promote your website and getting people to it?
Well, that's the golden question, right? I think by creating these other avenues like the podcast and social media, there's just another way to promote everything you're doing. As you know, at the end of every podcast, I tell people where to find me so they can find my social media, they can find my website through the podcast. Through social media, you can see podcast clips, you can learn about the podcast, you can link to go, everything is kind of feeding into the rest, if that makes sense. So I try to set it up where people can discover the different platforms and the different offerings I have.
Yeah.
But otherwise, with marketing, it's it's tough. I don't I don't have the perfect
I don't have an
answers.
answer either. So
Yeah. I mean, there's of course things you can do. You can do sponsored posts, you can advertise, you can spend those dollars to try to push your stuff out there more on Instagram or Facebook. I think a lot is word of mouth and other people sharing. That's always amazing when I see people tag me and stuff, or they say, "Oh, I sent your podcast to a friend," or that's a great way for people to discover. But or through, for me, networking in town. I mean, if I do a modeling job, let's say, then I meet photographers or I meet other social media marketing managers, and it kind of leads to other connections and growing that community. So I don't think there's one answer. I don't think there's one size fits all answer. It just takes time and
yeah.
building your brand. And I think knowing who or what you are as a brand too. So I know that's not a sexy answer,
But it's like an honest answer.
but
That's what it really looks
it
like.
just takes time, and I think once you get more established and really find your path and what you are able to give, you have to provide a service for people too. You have to be doing something, as you know, with you have a business, but you have to be offering something for people,
Mhm.
whether that is just like a funny video they can watch, like I'll do, or a podcast episode. There has to be something that they want to go to you for and seek you out for, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, they want to be educated or entertained or whatever
right.
it is that they're looking for. Like, definitely. And that totally makes sense where different blogs and different businesses need different ways to promote. And something that you just mentioned, and I kind of want to take a step back to this, is finding like who you are and coming up with your branding and your messaging and really maybe could you tell us the process of like coming up with all that, like your personal experience with that, and then also like setting up the blog?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I had looked into blogging in my mid 20s, maybe 24, 25. And the blog that I would have started in my mid 20s wouldn't be anything related to what I'm doing now. Cuz I just didn't know what I wanted to do yet. We were living in the Midwest at the time. I was kind of figuring myself out still and what I wanted to do career-wise and even what I wanted to provide as a service for people, what I wanted to write about. Totally different scenario. And then when I got back to thinking about blogging, I just thought I will make some people blog and have accounts and you never see their face. You know, they're completely behind the scenes. I am out there. I am the face of my brand. People will see me. They know, they'll, hey, Bets, they know my name. I'm out there, of course, with everything I'm doing. So that's not for everyone either. People to decide that. But I knew I wanted to kind of have a lifestyle experience. I had friends, people I knew that were like, oh, I love what you're wearing, or I want to hear about that trip you just went on. So I felt like I had some interest in my life and who I was already. And then, of course, the Bet's Life is a play off my name. I wanted to use that. So I got started with that and I knew I would be writing from my perspective. I knew I wanted to do more vulnerable personal writing. So it was me. I just decided that I was going to put myself out there. And again, that wouldn't be for everyone. Some days I'm like, but it's been nice for me to do that and I've enjoyed it. And I mean, I own what I do. I create kind of funny videos. I don't mind kind of embarrassing myself to a degree, I guess I could say, or getting a laugh. Humor is something that's so important to me. And I don't mind if I'm gonna put stuff out there with my writing that some people may not agree with or that might be too personal, but I enjoy that and it's what fuels me and what brings me to this connection and I hope empowering people through what they can learn from writing or a podcast episode and whatnot. So it just was what I was really passionate about and how I thought I could best serve people.
Do you want to start growing your business rapidly in a really fun way? Do you want to increase your visibility and profits? I have just the thing for you. My course, Great Guesting, How to Grow Your Business Through Being a Podcast Guest, is now available, and it's guaranteed to get you on podcasts. Do you want to connect with more clients, share your story, make stronger connections, and grow your audience? But do you find that you're second-guessing yourself, are indecisive on a topic because you're into so many things, and thinking, is this even possible? You'll love this step-by-step guide on how to be a podcast guest. We go over 6 lessons that are knowing your story, narrowing down the topic, finding podcasts to be on, setting up your audio, preparing to record, and of course, marketing, because that's what I'm all about. Being a guest can be fun, but if you don't have a plan to go with it, you're really just spending the hour talking. You're not moving your business forward. And that's exactly what this course is designed to teach you. You can find this course on my website at Espresso Podcast Production, and I guarantee you that you will be a guest on podcasts in no time. I think that is exactly what you're doing and creating this personal brand. I show my face on my Instagrams and, my business and things like that, but I'm not quite as out there as you are with your personal experiences and things like that. So that's something I really admire and think is awesome, because that really sets you apart from just any other creator. Like, you're right. People see you and they're like, oh yes, this is Betsy. They know you. They remember you. And so, yeah, awesome.
Thank you. I think it just is what felt the most authentic to me and to who I am. And I try to be myself. I feel like what you get from my account is who I am, and that's what I can provide.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. And I was just thinking, like, you always talk about being a Virgo on your podcast. I feel like that is sometimes a Virgo trait, but much more like a Leo trait sometimes,
Oh, interesting. I know I need to do my whole birth chart. I'm surprised I haven't. I need to really dive in, because the Virgo is strong. Virgo is strong in me. So,
well, speaking to you showing off who you are and creating this like brand that's memorable, that's probably what really stands out to partnerships as well, like brands who are looking for people to partner with. Do you want to talk about how you get those partnerships and how you kind of set up the system for that?
sure. I would say another truth bomb. I'm sorry, everyone. I would tell people that it takes time. I think people have this, just like anything that you look at where you're like, oh, wow, that career is amazing. They get all this free stuff. Oh, they get money for just doing a photo. Until you're actually doing it, everything always looks a little, the grass is always greener. You don't know the behind the scenes. And so I think that is kind of a stereotype of bloggers. But you don't start a blog, or you don't start a social media account and then you're not just like rolling in the money. There's not partnerships coming in. There's not people knocking at your door. So what I would say is that it takes time for anyone starting out. You have to build your following. You have to create content, build your brand, figure out what you're doing. I mean, day one of starting my blog, my website, everything looks completely different than it is now. Some stuff I was writing about, that's different than what I do now. Obviously, the podcast, there's so much that has evolved in that time. So it's really frustrating. And believe me, we just mentioned the Virgo stuff. I am not a super patient person. I want to work hard at something and I want it to happen now. And that is something I had to give myself a break and realize that you can absolutely get partnerships and make money and get deals, but it usually takes time. And you'll probably do a lot for free. I did too. Every now and then, I still do some stuff for free. It depends on the partnership. It depends on the relationship. But where people can start is you can make a media kit, which is basically a blogger influencer resume. You'll have your photo, you'll have information about yourself, and then that's your opportunity to provide any stats. How many people is your account reaching? What's your demographic? All that analytics. If people don't know, if you have a business account on social media, you get a breakdown of all of your analytics, how many times posts are shared, your likes, your comments, all this data. If you have a website, you have that data too. So on this media kit, that's your opportunity to provide those numbers and to showcase yourself to a brand, because they want to know what they're going to get out of working with you. There needs to be some payoff. They need to get eyes on stuff. So I would start there, and you have to pitch. And when I say pitch, we could do a whole episode just on this, but that is reaching out to brands. That's emailing, that's DMing, that's LinkedIn, that's however you want to try and contact someone. And that can be scary. And I would highly suggest, if you are reaching out to someone, take the time to cater that email. We all know what it feels like to get some very generic email. Or if I get emails and people will, dear, what do they say? Dear bestie, Besty. My name is misspelled all the time. If I see, I'm sorry to say, there's just judgment out there if it's not, written well, or it just seems like they copy and pasted. I'm not gonna answer that or pay attention, and most brands won't either. So take the time to dial in your pitch email, what you say to brands when you reach out, or your DM message. And I look at what's the worst that can happen. The worst that can happen, and what's most likely going to happen a lot of time when you're starting out, is that you just won't hear back. You'll take the time to do this stuff, you won't hear back. That's a bummer. It costs you some minutes of your life. It is what it is. I'm just going to put it out there. That's what's going to happen. Or same thing with DM, you just won't get any response back. Other worst thing that can happen is the brand will say no. And they'll usually politely say no, like, oh, we just don't have the room in our budget right now. We're not taking on any more partnerships. I get no's sometimes, it happens too. And sometimes you'll reach out, you won't hear back. And I've had the situation happen where I'll hear back like a year later. They'll be like, oh, we want to work with, so you never know what can happen, but it's a little bit just a numbers game in a way. You reach out, you hope you hear back, you hope that it's a collaboration that they want, that you can both have a good working relationship and provide, you can promote their product, they can get the benefits of that. So it's just this trial and error a bit at first. And now I'm in a position where I'm not doing as much pitching. I still can, but brands are starting to reach out to me more, which is great, makes it a little easier. But it just takes time. It takes building those connections, building those relationships. I also think something that's important is from day one, I was like, yes, I would like to make money doing this if I can, because I put a lot of time in. I provide a lot of free content. Of course, making some money would be great, but I never want to jeopardize my brand or my account by a quick buck. I don't want to be promoting random products. I don't want to be working with shady companies, not quality items. I know that my audience respects what I'm going to put out there for them. And hopefully it's already something that I'm using, that I already believe in, a company I already enjoy, a product I already use. So I would say focus on that. Focus on what you're already using, the brands you already love, the products you're like, wow, this is a great, reach out to those companies, start there. Because I think the moment that you start getting too random and people are like, what are you trying to promote on your account that has nothing to do with what you're doing? Or what is this? Once it starts getting too saturated or too random, that's when you can lose people. And in my opinion, it's not worth it to get that free product or to make a little bit of money to jeopardize your reputation, basically.
Yeah, I see that all the time with podcasts too, where it's just like the most random sponsor. I'm like, where did you find this? Like you're saying, it has to be a trade. So that media kit definitely shows the brand what they're going to get in return. But, if I was to sponsor, I don't know, maybe like some sports product on my podcast, they might pay me, but they're definitely not going to get anything in return, right? Like,
Right.
none of my audience is going to listen or, engage with that.
Right. It needs to make sense for both of you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, for sure. That would be some of my advice. And, be mindful about it and be patient, I guess. And unless you have a huge following, unless you have maybe hundreds of thousands of followers, the reality, I don't pay all my bills with the blog. I don't, to be honest with you. I make some money. Like to know it. I make money. There's avenues that I do make income, but I'm not providing the income for my whole lifestyle with the blog. So just so people have that reality check too, a lot of bloggers have 9-to-5 jobs, have other careers where they're still making an income. They're not necessarily making everything just from their account. So I know it can look that way sometimes, but there's the reality of there's not always these mass amounts of money that you're getting offered.
Right. Well, yeah, and thank you for that transparency, because that is like maybe what some people think of when they start a blog. But one thing that I really admire you for is you make it look like it is your full-time job. Like you're posting a lot of content, you're creating new content. You're not like just going a week without posting, like it looks like this is what you make your money from, and that is what really draws a lot of attention to it. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm definitely treat it like it is what I'm working on. It is my main focus right now. It is my passion project for sure. I'm writing, coming up with podcast ideas, creating content. Because if you're going to try to be a blogger, try to be an influencer or whatever you want to call it, you have to be consistent. Consistency is so key. And that's another piece of advice because I see people all the time. They're super active with their account and then they're radio silent. And then they're active a little bit and then they, again, nothing. And people lose interest. They have to, again, be finding something through you. Just like, with your career too, if you just suddenly weren't promoting what you do or doing podcast, showing this, yeah, people aren't going to be able to find you or they're not going to come back to you. They're coming to you for information about podcasting. They're coming to you to see new guests or see tidbits of what you have to offer, editing, whatever. So consistency is key.
Yes, 100%. And there's so many different ways I could go with this conversation. I would love to learn a little bit more about maybe because you do have your job, real estate, and then the blog. So do you have any tips for maybe how much content you create? And do you have like a system for keeping everything in order and make sure that you have new content all the time? I think this is where a lot of people can drop off, like, how often do I post? What do I post? Things like that.
Absolutely. I am a big believer, and you may do this as well, in batching content.
Mhm.
So if I will always keep a list, another hot tip that I always do in my notes app on my phone. I am always keeping an ongoing list of, oh, that would be a good podcast guest to have. Let me make a note of that. Oh, this would be a funny video to make. Oh, this would be a great topic to write about. Oh, this will be something that I want to talk about in the podcast. So I always keep a running list so that I'm not sitting at my desk banging my head trying to come up with ideas of what to write about. I already will have it going that I can usually look back and remember because I find that if I don't write it down when inspiration hits, if I don't write it down, it's gone. That's out the door. If I try to remember it later, I probably won't. So I try to keep a list. And when I talk about batching, if I have some videos I want to create, some content I want to create, I will try to spend a couple hours or however amount of time to get that done in the same day. Because if I'm, let's say, doing my hair or makeup, I have that done, I can just get stuff rolling and film a few videos, get the editing done for that. And then I have in drafts maybe 5 reels or something that I can post periodically. I just try to also stay ahead. Same thing with if I need to shoot something, maybe if I film videos earlier in the day, then I can go get those shots I need to if I am shooting something for a brand, if I have a particular product, if I'm highlighting some event, whatever it is that I'm doing. My advice with batching is so that you're not getting ready, doing one thing, and then trying to write, and then trying to send emails and trying to working on something for a block of time, I find is really helpful for me because I can focus on that and I'm not just zigzagging around and taking up more time going back and forth. But yeah, I try to kind of have a bank of stuff that I'm working with. So I'll usually be working on a few blog posts at a time in the drafts. I'll usually, like I said, have content saved up. I, as you know, will try to film podcasts sometimes ahead of time. So I'm not week to week trying to do that or schedule interviews so that I know I have that lineup coming and I have that already good to go. So it's a little bit about organization and thinking ahead and being prepared. But yeah, for me, the best thing has been kind of focusing on one thing at a time or having particular days. Maybe this week, this is going to be a writing day for me. So I know Wednesday, I'm going to focus on writing. I'm going to work on blog posts. I'm going to work on emails, whatever I need to do. And then the next day is for shooting stuff. So it's every week is different, to be honest. There's no perfect system. I don't use a planning app. I probably should. I know a lot of people that do. There's different ones that you can get all your posts done and that will schedule it out for you. So it'll automatically post on Tuesday for you at this time. So I know people do that. I've heard mixed reviews, and sometimes when those get glitchy or they don't work out, that's a whole other thing. And then you have to really have your content ready for the next week or so. So I don't personally do that, but a lot of people do. So those would be the ideas I can share about a little bit of preparing for the week and or how my weeks go. It just really depends what's on the schedule for me. Sometimes it's a modeling shoot, so I know I have to get ready and do that all day, so I'm not going to have as much time for other stuff. So it's just looking day to day, week to week, month to month. And I'm a big believer for goals. I probably talked about it on the podcast. That's a great way to look at your schedule too. What do I need to get done this week? What do I need to get done this month? What do I need to get done this quarter? Kind of planning.
Totally. I think you do have an episode about SMART goals. So for the listeners, go find the episode on
Yes,
goal
there we
setting.
go.
Awesome. Well, you've shared such amazing information today. Last question I have for you is, I know you have this background in writing. You said that you've interned at magazines and worked for magazines before. I'm curious if you have any tips, maybe some writing tips, like where they can like learn to write better, or is it just practice? Do you have any writing tips for anyone?
I think it is just practice. And I think the biggest advice I always get or I think about is writers write. And I know that is very simple. That's about as simple as we can boil it down to. But that is the first step you can take because a lot of people have that book. Oh, I have it all. It's all up in my mind. It's written up here. Or, oh, yeah, I want to start that. I want to start doing that more. The first step is to actually do it. And everything you write doesn't need to be a finished product. Everything you write doesn't need to be something that you actually end up using. I have plenty of things that I start and stop, or I go back to and change, or that I decide I actually don't want to post about, or whatever it is. So, just the practice of writing, of finding your voice when you write, of just getting it on the page. Like I said, it could never even see the light of day, but you're writing, you're practicing, you're building your craft, and find what you like writing about. That's a huge one. And there's blogs about everything. I was just at Disneyland. There are people that solely blog and write about Disneyland. Anything is possible out there. Either you can have any focus you want. It doesn't need to be something very broad. It could be very, very specific. So whatever you enjoy working on, whatever you actually think will get you to sit down at your keyboard and do it. That would be my advice. So it's just take action. And I think for a while I even dealt with, oh, I've had stuff published in magazines I've done a lot of writing, but I still kind of had that like, oh, but I'm not a writer. I don't know. I don't have a novel. I'm not currently working on a novel. I looked at it like that. And then I had to even change my own mindset on it. Like, no, if you are writing, you're a writer. If people are reading your writing, you're a writer. So I think that just believe in yourself, work on it. That's all you can really do. That would be my advice because so often people never get those words on the page. They never even try to begin with.
Yeah, they stop before they even start.
Right.
Very common. Such good advice there. This is how I start wrapping up every episode, and I ask every guest this. I would love it if you could share 3 action steps for the audience to take to move forward in maybe starting a blog or their business or whatever it is you want to challenge them with.
Sure. I will give you some key takeaways. I think about if not you, then who?
Mm-hmm.
Have the confidence in what you're doing. And I also believe in fake it till you make it. Starting the blog, that was scary. That was putting myself out there. That was very public. And you just have to have that faith and you have to go for it and not be super scared of failure or how other people are going to perceive what you're doing. That was a big one for me to overcome. I was worried a lot about what other people would think in the beginning. And now I'm not as much, and it's actually really freeing. So you get to that point where if you're loving what you're doing and you're confident, you're feeling good about it, then I think you start focusing less on if people are going to be judgy, if people are going to say, "Oh, who does she think she is?" or whatever, you know? So basically, why not you?
Mhm.
Why not you? So
Yeah.
believe in yourself, have that confidence, go after it no matter what. I think another one is just, as I've talked about, it is a marathon. It's not an overnight thing. I always joke, like I said, that I started the blog to get to writing and then I had to get a minor in social media. There will be other bumps in the road and learning curves and frustrating moments, and you will feel like you don't know what you're doing. So just know that it won't be this perfect, clear path, that it will take time and it won't be as easy or as straight a journey, but keep going with it.
I love that.
And I think also respect and enjoy the journey. I know that I have to stop myself from focusing on that end goal or what I haven't achieved or how I need to get somewhere faster than I'm not. And what I will take the time to do now is reflect on everything I have accomplished,
Mhm.
goals that I have checked off, because there are so many joyous moments. And if you're always rushing ahead, if you're always down on yourself for what you haven't achieved or how you don't think you've made it yet, or how you could be doing something better or XYZ, you're not thinking about all that you have done and achieved and created and the successes that you do have. So remember to not forget about what you are accomplishing and how far you've come. I know that's easier said than done. It's something I deal with all the time, but I have to remind myself, focus on the steps and not just the destination.
Yes. Oh my gosh, those are three great takeaways. Thank you so much for sharing those. And
Yeah.
where can people connect with you and find your content?
Yes, as we've talked a little bit about, thebetslife.com, the Bets Life on Instagram, the Bets Life podcast. Wherever the Bets Life is, basically, you can find me under that name and handle and whatnot. So thank
Awesome.
you so much for having me.
Yes, I'll put all of those in the show notes. And thanks so much for joining me. I love working with you. I love the content that you're creating. I've learned so much from your podcast.
Oh.
So, yeah, thank you so much.
It's so fun to work with you. And yeah, if anyone listening is thinking about starting a podcast or they need an editor, you know who to go with.
Well, thank you. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.